Well, welcome everybody to Breaching the Boardroom podcast, where we discuss the intersection of leadership, culture, and technology. I'm your host, David Morrow, and joined today by special guest David Turner, founder of Turner Process Solutions. David, welcome to the studio, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you
Yeah.
reaching out.
No worries. So walk us through Turner Process Solutions, what your current role is, and then we'll dig into kind of how you got there.
Okay. Well, currently my role is president of Turner Process. It started 2.5 years ago. And right now we're focused on new process design, mostly around system automation and making sure that the plants are running efficiently. So doing a bit of brownfield work as well.
Okay, so it's mostly in the manufacturing space, or is it in the manufacturing equipment design space?
It's 100% in the manufacturing space.
Okay.
We do the equipment design is not really discrete equipment design. We're basically taking off the shelf components and plugging those into processes so that the process works. Like we'll size a vessel and then we'll hook all the pipes to it and the agitation and any kind of heating or cooling on that and design that process. But we're not going to design the tank to say this is the kind of coils we'll use. We just need to know how much heat load is what we're taking on and off.
Got it. So you're not redesigning the actual components themselves, but how they all work together, basically.
Yes.
Okay, makes sense. So why the passion and process? Like, how did you wind up? Like, did you always was your Lincoln log set when you were a kid, like phenomenally organized and you were working on the process while mine was like being thrown across the room, or what was it?
So I used to break a lot of stuff at the house.
Okay.
I'd work on the cars with my dad. I'd take stuff apart and put it back together. Once I took an alarm clock apart, pulled out the capacitor, not knowing what it was, put everything back together and threw sparks and a little bit of flame and, unplugged it. So
That's
just,
hilarious.
the normal stuff
I'm
that,
sure
that
your
we do.
parents appreciated that, right? Like the kids putting the
Yeah,
alarm
I would
clock
not
on
let my
fire.
kids do that today.
Yeah, that's funny. That's great. So it sounds like what you're doing though is pretty technical, or at least it's very niche, right? So how one question we get asked a lot is, what schooling, certifications, education, I don't care if it's formal schooling, trade school, or whatever, but is the schooling that you got, like, walk us through a little bit of it, but like, was the education or training or certs, whatever you did that relate to what you're doing today?
Oh, 100%. I
Okay.
went to college for chemical engineering, so I have a bachelor's in chemical engineering, and I got a couple certifications around programming with Honeywell and Allen Bradley. So those certifications to say I can program a industrial computer or a PLC, and
So
then through that
for
process.
listeners, I don't mean to interrupt you, bud,
Oh,
but
sorry.
for listeners, what's a PLC?
It's a programmable logic controller. It's basically a little mini industrial ruggedized computer that turns on and off valves based on the way the sensors are telling it to turn on and off valves and how it's programmed.
Got
So
it.
it's more or less the automation brain behind industrial automation.
Okay. So when you were a kid, did you know this is what you wanted to do when you were growing up, or at least in the
No,
general field?
I knew I wanted to be an engineer. Mainly, a big part of being an engineer was I wanted to eat when I grew up. And so I knew
Mhm.
that engineering would always have a job. And then I picked chemical engineering because felt like in high school that was the most versatile of those engineering roles. I wasn't going to be, you know, what I felt pigeonholed in mechanical by designing transmissions or pigeonholed in civil designing bridges.
Bridges, yeah.
So I felt like chemical was the most versatile because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had one class in college that was industrial controls, like the automation piece of it.
Yep.
And I absolutely hated it. 100% hated it. It was
Really.
terrible. I didn't want to do it. I gritted my teeth and bared it and got through the class. And then my first job out of school was industrial automation.
Ah,
So, it's amazing what you learn when a paycheck depends on it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you become an expert to something you previously didn't love.
Right.
That's amazing. So, one thing you mentioned is all of the components in like the computer module. So, I mean, we're a cybersecurity company.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're also an IT company, but there's a lot of risk today with devices being connected to the network, right? Because then you're on the same network
Mm-hmm.
or a similar type of network of computers in your role or with your clients. Do you guys ever have those conversations? You may not. I was just curious.
100%.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
As not necessarily in school, because in 2003 there
Yeah, it wasn't
the
cybersecurity.
communication, yeah,
Right,
it wasn't a thing.
right.
But in the past 10 years, industrial automation has changed from being a dedicated communication protocol to Ethernet based.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
talking across the same networks, using a ruggedized version of a home network switch, or a ruggedized version of a um, a network router. It's just an industrial version that's going to be 99.999% uptime.
Yeah. And
So
so
they're exactly the
security's
same.
got to be, yeah. So security's got to be, I imagine, taken into consideration
It
whenever
it
they're doing
is
the designs and
It
the
is huge.
configurations.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is really, really big, and we partner with several. Like, I'm not a networking guy. I
Right.
can program, but I can't network because it was never really a focus for me, and I kind of hopped off the boat.
Well, it's a totally different type of engineering, right?
It is
Yeah,
100%. And right now, there's kind of a convergence between IT security and what we call OT security,
that's right.
where
Yep.
all the IT guys are the business, the laptops, the business profiles, and the OT is what we call operational technology, and that's all
Right.
the industrial computers on the manufacturing floor processes.
Well, it's so
And
critical
th-
because,
those guys don't like to talk to each other.
right. Well, and it's so critical though, because when there's an attack, a cyber attack, and something like ransomware happens, we've seen it with clients that have brought us in afterward,
Hmm.
and it's brutal because it's not about what the cyber criminals are asking for in a ransom. It's about the downtime, right? It's
Hmm.
about every minute it has a dollar value, every hour has a great deal of value. And
Right.
sometimes, depending on how prepared they were ahead of time or what controls they had or how it's configured, then
Hmm.
it could be weeks sometimes until they're
Oh,
back up. And that could
absolutely.
destroy a brand.
Yes. I mean, you're looking at thousands of dollars an hour
Absolutely.
for small to mid-sized businesses. If
Right.
you get into a refinery, it's tens of thousands of dollars an hour. $1 million a day ultimately is what you're looking at,
Unbelievable.
in downtime.
Yeah. And that's just nothing that needed to be considered really,
Hmm.
15, 20 years ago. It
Right.
just wasn't really, I mean, it was a potential,
Well,
but it really wasn't addressed as
it
common.
wasn't really an issue until no one thought about it until Stuxnet. Once Stuxnet
Yep.
happened, that really shined the high beams on industrial cybersecurity, and
Yep.
that's where they got started. And once that
Yep.
got started, you have two trains of thought. OT security is 100% uptime, and IT security is, well, we can take some downtime. It doesn't really matter as much because we need to make sure all our patches are in order. Because
Right.
as soon as a patch comes out, you want to update it. And
Right.
right now, most industrial machines are running Windows 10. I mean, that's where we
Oh,
are,
wow. Really?
because Windows 10 is
Right.
stable as far as Windows
Right.
goes. So those are the programming softwares that are in use for 80 to 90% of the in the industrial arena. So no one really wants to go to Windows 11 because it's untested for an
And yet
industrial
it's
environment.
going on end of life.
Exactly.
And yet Microsoft is going, well, sorry, you're going to have to
Yep.
upgrade,
Exactly.
which is just a major undertaking for manufacturers.
Oh, it's terrible. I mean, we have plants that are running 30-year-old equipment in it. with
Right.
30-year-old PLCs that are older than I am. Like,
Unbelievable.
but those aren't on the network, so it's okay. I
Right.
mean, when typically what happens is when people start with automation, when the industrial factories start with automation, they say no network connectivity, none.
Right.
So there's an air gap between your plant floor and your business network. Well, over time, plants need to have data, and that data is important for making database decisions. You can't
Correct.
make good decisions without good data.
Right.
So, the industrial computers are coming on board saying, okay, well, we can historize this data. We can we can take this data and we can process it so you can make better decisions.
Right.
Well, once that bridge is over, to make it easy for engineers and decision makers to get the data, you have to have that network connectivity. Well,
Right.
that's where the IT OT security comes into place. And that's where you have to have what we call a DMZ, a demilitarized zone,
Right.
between, basically your IT router network and your OT router network. And that's where
Yeah.
the handshakes happen.
Right. Well, and that's where a lot of cyber criminals focus on, right? Because if
Absolutely,
they,
because that's how you get in.
right. Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah. So in terms of leadership, how, when you've led teams in your career, do you have a leadership style? Do you have somebody that inspired you, or a TED talk that you find interesting, or anything
Well,
like that?
the what's the guy? The start with why?
Oh
Can't
yeah,
remember his
Simon Sinek.
Cynic.
Yes.
Yeah, he actually is one of the guys I like to follow, and I watch and I listen to his talks
Yeah.
regularly.
I'm a
I
huge
used to,
fan.
for a
Yeah.
huge fan, and then then Ted Lasso came around, and a couple of his
Yes.
sayings
He's
kind
a
of stuck.
phenomenal leader.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Ted
when you
Lasso.
can write it, I mean the people follow the writer.
Yes, exactly.
But it's I have found, like, I've cut my teeth on with in my career with really bad leadership and really good leadership, and I kind
Mm,
of I learned a lot of what not to do and a lot of what to do. Ultimately, it's you know sitting down with people, getting their input, and sometimes you got to let people make their own mistakes,
right.
because that's I never learned when anything was working right. I learned when equipment was broken,
Right.
and
That's exactly
so
right.
when there's downtime, when there's stuff broken, you have an urgency to fix it, and so you learn quickly.
Well, I
So
think that it illustrates something about the person's personality too, right? Like
mhm.
you see the grit in them when there's some challenge and there's some resistance, right?
Oh,
So when they
absolutely.
go and they fail, and how they keep going and they remain positive and determined, and then you see them finish it, you're like,
Hmm.
well done, right? That was really,
It they own it better. They feel
yes,
better about it versus saying, okay, well, this is what to do and this is how to do it. It's more of a, this is what you need to do. If you have questions, come ask me.
yep,
And then monitoring and touching base along the way of the task, and then
absolutely,
giving them larger and larger tasks. And
absolutely,
sometimes failure happens, and that's just part of the learning process. Being okay with failure.
yep.
Like, you can't cost tens of thousands of dollars in failure, but you can be okay with it as long
Right.
as
I
there's a
mean, you
learning
can't get a
opportunity.
suit in a class action, please. Like, right, you can't do that type of failure. But there's a
Right.
lot of, it's a really good lesson, and I'm glad you brought it up, because accountability is lost a lot of times, right? Like, people don't learn because they're so afraid to make a mistake. And if they make any mistake, they blame somebody else, or they blame the condition, or they blame the technology, right?
Hmm.
And in reality, what you're looking for is just effort. Like, try, fail a little bit, keep pushing, and you're just looking for them to just keep evolving, and then they just keep developing. And sometimes when they don't take accountability, how do you address that? Like, if you have a team member and you find them making excuses and they don't take accountability, is there a way that you found that helps you address that?
It depends. It depends on the person. I mean, there was once where it was very readily apparent that it was an issue that they caused, and they needed to fix. So I laid out the plan. I was like, well, this is the issue. This is what needs to be fixed, and it happened it happened while you were here.
Right.
I
It's
didn't do
tough.
it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And that's,
Yeah, it's
I was like,
hard, right? Because
I'm
you
not
know,
blaming anyone. Just
right.
you need to fix it. And then later
Yes.
on, it's like, oh yeah, it was my fault. And a lot of
Right.
times, it's just addressing the problem with a solution without blaming anything. It's
Well, I
it's
think
not a
that's really
person.
important, right? So,
Hmm.
two good points you bring up. One, don't just come to a leader with a complaint, right? Like, just
Hmm.
nobody, there's no space to just gripe, right? But come to the leader, be like, I've identified a problem. This kind of, this process, this condition, whatever it is, there's an issue here. Here's my suggestion. So at
Hmm.
least you have thought about what good would look like if we solved it, right? And the other
Right.
thing is, where the leader kind of makes it a safe place to admit mea culpa, right? Just
Hmm.
admitting, hey, I made a mistake. And that way, good. Like you're better off doing that as an employee and then going and understanding you have accountability just to fix it. Like you made the mess, just fix it. But
Exactly.
but that's much better than sitting there denying that you did it. Like we're not going to argue about it, right? Like when the leader knows that it
Yeah.
happened, you were the only one there, right? Um
Hmm.
Sometimes I found when I was leading a team, tell me what you think of this. What I've done is when I've made a mistake, I bring it up to the team. And I'm like, hey, I was going down this path and then I figured out this was wrong, and I learned a lesson from it. But it's just kind of good to recognize that. And then they see, hey, it is safe to make a mistake
Hmm.
here. Leader who just admitted to making a mistake, right?
Right. And I've made mistakes as, as a follower and as a leader. And just
Mm-hmm.
admitting those, even as the leadership, it's like, hey, I messed up. I need your help to correct it because here's where we are today.
Yeah.
This is how far we've gotten with it. This is how far I've gotten with it. This is what I think we need to do next. So can you help me out?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
in assigning and just, addressing, I know I created more work for you. I'm sorry about that. I'll make it right, but I need help today.
Yeah,
and,
that's phenomenal.
and being in manufacturing, everything is a sense of urgency. I mean,
Right.
there's no tomorrow. I mean, and
Yeah,
you're only there
you
30% of the time.
yeah, you've mentioned that several times, and that's something that a lot of people in other industries don't necessarily recognize. Like in healthcare, we know you have to have 100% uptime, right? You're operating
Hmm.
on people, right? Like,
Right.
networks have to be up. But like for manufacturing, we realize that production is down and there might be lost profit. But we forgot that like so many things are interdependent, right? Because you have the IT part and the OT part
Hmm.
blending together. That's really good insight.
Right. And that's where, a lot of, network connectivity comes into play as well, is that it's by being connected, you actually can reduce your downtime because you have
Yep.
more information, one, and, you're only at the, like typical work days, you're only at a plant 30 to 40% of the day.
Right.
So when you need, additional assistance from skilled people, they may not be at the facility.
Right.
So being connected via network gets you up faster because there's no travel time involved.
Right. Exactly. And so it spurns communication, inter-team communication, as well as then the analytics and the data.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's really good. How is CMMC, the new changes in CMMC? How is it affecting the clients that you guys work with, if at all?
It's really not affecting any of
The ones that
my
you've dealt
clients,
with? Yeah.
the ones I've dealt with. It
Yeah.
hasn't.
I was just curious.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, what is on the horizon for you? What do you have coming up?
Actually,
Walk us through it.
we partnered. We started looking at additional SCADA systems. SCADA is supervisory control and data acquisition. So
Yep.
basically, servers that can collect and historize the data from processes.
Okay.
And
Phenomenal.
there's a newer software called Ignition that we've started deploying for customers. So we're getting, basically more deployments under our belt for SCADA systems to help historize and trend data from the manufacturing floor. So that's really what we're looking at right now, is helping provide process information for decision makers.
Oh,
And
that's
doing
great.
it in a way that's actionable.
That's great. Hey, within an organization, within a vendor that you work with or one of the providers, is there a certain type of role that you guys support? Meaning, like, are you guys usually supporting the VP of this or the operations person of this type, or is each organization a little different?
Typically, we're supporting the engineering managers
Okay,
and the maintenance
that's what I was
managers.
curious. Yeah.
So it's really that plant level, department manager level. So operations managers, engineering managers. We do integrate with some plant managers for smaller facilities. So those are, and then typically what happens is we'll support them locally because they have their pulse on the plant and they're the
Right.
ones that have the immediate needs.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll work with engineering firms as well from a project management standpoint for specific process designs. And then
That's
as we grow
fantastic.
with one facility, typically plant managers will introduce us to other plant managers or
Right.
directors, and then we'll meet with directors to be able to take on additional projects or support and other projects from other plants.
So it doesn't even, if I understand correctly, it doesn't even necessarily matter what they're making or what they're manufacturing. The process of doing it and making sure it's done more efficiently, done more profitably, the analytics are drawn from it. That's really what you guys are focused on.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's more process, and we kind of have two buckets, of processes from a manufacturing standpoint. We have discrete manufacturing, which is handling
Yeah.
ones and
What
twos.
is that? What is discrete manufacturing?
Well, discrete manufacturing is handling parts and pieces. So
Okay.
it's
Makes
a
sense.
box or
Right.
it's a hat or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have bulk manufacturing, which is what I call inside the pipe. So it's bulk
Right.
material handling. It's a silo full of corn, or
Right.
it's a silo full of dust, or whatever that is. It's bulk material, and we handle bulk processes to discrete processes, so like packaging machines. So we'll take
Yeah.
bulk material and put it in, help define that process so that it can be packaged. And
Excellent.
typically what we've seen is plants are adding additional packaging lines and automating packaging systems. And there's integrators out there who can do packaging very well, but they don't do bulk material handling. So we'll actually
So
help
that's your
get the material
differentiator.
from
Yeah.
bulk material to their packaging line to be more efficient in their engineering effort.
That's phenomenal. I just learned so much. You're like Oz from behind the curtain. Like, I just go and buy stuff and it's already done. And I'm like, oh, I just imagine the things come like that. It's like
Mm-hmm.
all of the work and all of the engineering behind the scenes it's really, it's an art as well as a science, isn't it?
Absolutely. The more places you see, the more nuggets you get to pick out to say, oh, that's a better way of doing it, because every industry
Yeah.
is very, very siloed. There's very
Right.
few crossovers. So people in the feed industry do it one way, and people in the pharma industry do it a completely different way. And sometimes there's some overlap where you see some best practices that you can take from one side to the other
Oh,
and do things more efficiently.
that's phenomenal. Well, David Turner, thank you so much, sir. I really enjoyed our conversation. We will have the link to your LinkedIn to
Mm-hmm.
people to connect and follow you, as well as to your organization's website. And we really appreciate it. Keep us posted along the way as you guys continue to grow and have some cool projects that you're working on. And we will sync up again soon.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me on, David.
No, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.